Close your eyes. Take one slow, gentle breath and let the world slowly fade away. Tonight, I want to tell you about a place that still keeps one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in history. More than 100 years ago, on a lonely island surrounded by the endless Atlantic Ocean, 3 lighthouse keepers disappeared without leaving behind a single answer. No bodies were ever found. No boat was missing. No signs of violence. Only silence. A cold dinner left untouched. A stopped clock. And a lighthouse that continued shining into the storm. Even today, no one truly knows what happened on those dark cliffs. Some believe the sea claimed them. Others believe something impossible was waiting in the fog. Tonight, we won't try to solve the mystery. Instead, we'll quietly walk through it together, listening to the rain, the crashing waves, and the lonely lighthouse that still stands against the endless night. So, get comfortable, close your eyes, and let the story carry you gently toward peaceful sleep. The Flannan Isles, a small group of rocky islands far beyond the western coast of Scotland. Wild, lonely, and surrounded by the endless Atlantic Ocean. In the year 1900, a lighthouse stood proudly upon the highest cliff. Its bright light guided ships safely through dangerous waters. 3 men were trusted with its care. James Ducat, the experienced principal keeper. Thomas Marshall, a thoughtful man who carefully recorded every detail inside the lighthouse logbook. And Donald MacArthur, strong, quiet, and respected by those who knew him. Life on the island followed the same peaceful rhythm every single day. Each morning, the keepers climbed the lighthouse tower. They cleaned the giant glass lens until it sparkled. They checked the powerful lamp. They polished the brass railings. Everything had to be perfect, because one small mistake could cost countless lives at sea. When their work was finished, they often stood together near the cliff's edge, watching endless waves crash against the black rocks below. The wind never truly stopped. It carried the smell of salt, fresh rain, and the endless ocean. Days passed quietly. Sometimes thick fog covered the islands. Sometimes brilliant sunshine painted the sea with silver light. But no matter the weather, the lighthouse never stopped shining. Far below, ships appeared only as tiny shadows upon the horizon. Sometimes the keepers waved, knowing the sailors would probably never see them. Their world was peaceful, simple, almost forgotten. Yet, living on such an isolated island came with a strange feeling. After sunset, the silence became almost overwhelming. Only the sound of the waves, the distant cries of seabirds, and the lonely wind remained. Some nights, the fog became so thick that the lighthouse itself seemed to disappear into the darkness. The keepers often said the sea had its own voice, sometimes gentle, sometimes angry, and sometimes it whispered in ways no one could explain. At first, they laughed about those stories. None of them believed the old legends told by local fishermen, stories about strange lights dancing across the sea, unexplained footsteps upon empty rocks, and voices carried through the storm. But before long, those old stories would no longer seem impossible. Winter, arrived quietly. The days became shorter. The nights grew longer. Cold winds swept endlessly across the lonely islands. Far out at sea, dark clouds gathered along the horizon. The Atlantic Ocean slowly changed its mood. Gentle waves became restless. The peaceful sound of water turned into the deep roar of an approaching storm. Inside the lighthouse, the three keepers continued their daily routine. The great lamp still shone brightly. The logbook was carefully updated. Everything appeared completely normal. On December 12, 1900, Thomas Marshall made another entry in the Lighthouse Journal. He wrote that an unusually powerful storm was approaching. The winds were fierce. The sea was becoming dangerously rough. What made the entry so unusual was something else. Marshall described Donald MacArthur, a man known for being fearless, as unusually quiet and deeply shaken. According to the journal, even James Ducat, the oldest and most experienced keeper, appeared worried. The final words suggested they were praying together. That single sentence has puzzled historians for more than a century, because official weather records later showed no major storm had reached the islands that day. So, what exactly were they seeing? What frightened three experienced lighthouse keepers long before the storm officially arrived? No one knows. As darkness covered the island, the lighthouse beam continued sweeping across the endless sea, again and again and again. Somewhere beyond the waves, a ship captain later reported something unusual. The lighthouse, normally visible from many miles away, appeared strangely silent. The familiar light could no longer be seen. Whether it was hidden by fog or something far more mysterious, no one could tell. On the mainland, no one suspected anything was wrong. But out there, on that lonely island, something had already begun. Something that would become one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. And by the time help finally arrived, the three keepers had completely vanished. On December 26, 1900, after several days of violent weather, the relief ship, Hesperus, finally reached the Flannan Isles. The crew expected a familiar welcome. Normally, one of the lighthouse keepers would already be waiting near the landing platform. A signal flag would be raised. A friendly wave would appear from the cliffs above. But this time, nothing. The island was completely silent. No movement, no voices, no sign of life. Captain James Harvey immediately sensed that something was wrong. The ship's horn echoed across the cliffs. Again and again. No one answered. One of the relief keepers, Joseph Moore, stepped ashore alone. He slowly climbed the steep stone path leading toward the lighthouse. The wind whispered through the grass. Seabirds circled silently overhead. Every step felt heavier than the last. When he reached the lighthouse, the main door was closed, but it wasn't locked. He pushed it open. The room inside was perfectly quiet. The kitchen looked almost untouched. A half-finished meal remained on the table. One chair had been pushed back, as if someone had stood up suddenly and never returned. The clock had stopped. The fireplace had almost burned out. Everything felt frozen in time. Joseph called their names. "James! Thomas! Donald!" Only silence answered him. He searched every room, every staircase, every corner of the lighthouse. Nothing. No footprints, no signs of a struggle, no blood, no broken furniture. Only an overwhelming feeling that whoever had been there had vanished without warning. Outside, the great lighthouse still stood proudly above the crashing waves, its light still shining across the dark Atlantic. But the three men trusted to keep it burning had disappeared without leaving behind a single trace. And from that moment, the mystery of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse began. News of the disappearance spread quickly across Scotland. Newspapers called it the mystery of the Flannan Isles. Investigators carefully searched every corner of the island. They examined the lighthouse, the cliffs, the pathways, and the dangerous shoreline below. At first, the clues seemed ordinary, but together they painted a picture no one could fully explain. One heavy waterproof coat was still hanging inside the lighthouse. Experienced keepers never went outside during a storm without wearing it. Yet one man apparently had. The lighthouse logbook became another mystery. Its final entries described strange weather, powerful winds, and unusual fear among the keepers. But official weather records later revealed something surprising. On the dates mentioned in the journal, no severe storm had been recorded near the islands. Why did the keepers write about a terrifying storm that seemingly did not exist? The western landing platform showed signs of incredible damage. Iron railings had been bent. Heavy equipment weighing hundreds of pounds had been thrown across the rocks. Strong waves had clearly crashed against the cliffs. Some investigators believed the men rushed outside to secure equipment, only to be swept away by a massive rogue wave. Others disagreed. They questioned why all three experienced keepers would leave the lighthouse at the same time. Lighthouse rules required at least one keeper to remain inside. Breaking that rule made very little sense. As the years passed, new theories continued to appear. A giant wave, a tragic accident, a secret argument, even supernatural legends born from the lonely islands. But no theory answered every question. No bodies were ever found. No final message was ever discovered. Only the lonely lighthouse remained, standing silently above the endless Atlantic Ocean, keeping its secrets hidden within the wind. Years passed, but the mystery never faded. The lighthouse continued to guide ships safely across the Atlantic. New keepers arrived. New logbooks were written. New storms came and went. Yet every person who worked there eventually heard the same story. The three men who simply disappeared. Local fishermen often refused to sail too close to the island after sunset. Some claimed they had seen strange lights moving along the cliffs long after the lighthouse had been closed for the night. Others spoke of hearing distant voices carried across the wind, calling out through the darkness, only to disappear with the crashing waves. No one could ever prove those stories, but they continued to be told generation after generation. Historians spent decades studying every document, every weather report, every diary, every official investigation. Some believed a giant rogue wave had swept the keepers into the sea. Others believed panic had caused them to make a fatal mistake. A few believed there were answers that history had simply lost forever. Even today, visitors who travel to the Flannan Isles describe an unusual feeling. The islands are beautiful, peaceful, almost untouched by time. Yet standing beside the old lighthouse, many people say they feel an overwhelming silence. A silence so deep, it feels almost alive. Perhaps it is only the endless ocean. Perhaps it is only the lonely wind. Or perhaps some places simply remember the people who never came home. As night slowly covers the Atlantic once again, the lighthouse continues to stand against the rain, against the waves, against time itself. Its bright light still reaches across the dark sea, just as it did more than 100 years ago. But one question still remains. What truly happened to James Ducat Thomas Marshall and Donald MacArthur on that lonely winter night? No one knows, and perhaps no one ever will. Now, the rain grows softer. The waves become calmer. Your breathing becomes slower. Your eyes become heavier. Allow the sound of the ocean to carry every thought away. Leave the mystery behind. Leave the world behind, and simply drift into a peaceful, restful sleep.